Okay, we're going to really cruise through this section. It's more just kind of a educational section, but we need to speed up so that you're not spending too many hours watching drug education, because I want to make it fair for you. So I'm going to go through this drug lab section pretty quick. So the slides are going to move really quick. We're just going to skim through it, probably do it in about 10 or 15 minutes. So there is a couple stories in here, though, that were really impactful for me, and I think that it would help you see kind of the lifestyle of the tweaker. Because again, like the cooks, I told you and I predominantly dealt with white cooks, like Caucasian cooks, because that was just kind of who did. As a matter of fact, I can't even think. I think there might have been a couple of Hispanic cooks towards the end, but almost all my cooks were white tweakers, if you want to call them. They were meth users. Okay, so this is clandestine drug labs. Overall, the definition, you probably read it by now: covert or secret illicit operation consisting of a sufficient combination of apparatus and chemicals that have been or could be used to produce, manufacture, or synthesize controlled substances. Remember I told you, like, drug paraphernalia, right? Drug paraphernalia is not drug paraphernalia unless it's possessed with the intent to use or it has been used. Same thing with this, with meth labs. Because you have, as we go through this, you're going to see, hey, I have that equipment at home. I have those chemicals. I got fingernail polish remover. That's acetone. Same thing, right? Let's see how this works. I guess my thing would have been fine here. So drug labs. Drug labs, like, we are trained to work all kinds of drug labs. GHB, which is gamma hydroxybutyrate, which is a downer. It's a club drug. There's the HI method that's hydriodic acid. Those are the cooks I dealt with. Midwest was anhydrous ammonia, or they called them the Nazi methods. I dealt with a couple Nazi cooks. They call them Nazi cooks because originally the first recipe was found in a book that had like swastikas and things like that. But almost every property I went to had security, like camera. Like almost all of them had cameras. They had signs. And where do we find labs? Literally everywhere. Hotels and apartments. Like almost every hotel along I-17 and along I-10 has had a meth lab in it. Like, I could tell you story after story after story. Houses, motorhomes, like RVs that would be used. They'd drive around and cook in it, or is in a backyard cooking in it. Storage lockers. They would rent a storage locker that had electricity, and they'd go in there because you could go access it 24/7. They'd go cook meth at night. Businesses, like there's a dentist office that was cooking meth out in the desert. Like, you can do it anywhere. So there's just a beaker, and I'm not going to go into all these chemicals, but there's a beaker that is common with the meth production that I dealt with. But you notice that beaker looks a lot like this coffee carafe. You can go get those at Sabres, Goodwill. Like, they're really cheap, and guess what? They're designed to be heated. Doesn't that look like, we call those, that's an Erlenmeyer flask. Like, I could spend $100 for that flask to cook meth, or I can go get a coffee carafe for $20. Same thing. It doesn't matter. So that's why when you think of a drug lab, you think of all this fancy chemical equipment. No, man, we're talking like coffee carafes, and I'll show you the rest of some of this stuff here. Look at that. There's something called a separatory funnel that you can spend $100 on to separate two-phase liquids. They use T-jars and a turkey baster. That's why I'm telling you, like, you have these things in your house. There's a Pyrex dish with red phosphorus that you should not heat because it can explode, and they're microwaving it. That's like, you know how many explosions and fires I was on over the years? A ton of them. There's a closet with actual chemical equipment in it, and actually this right here is a heating mantle. And so this is a little bit more upgraded, but what kind of equipment do they use to make meth? Tubing, coffee filters, cat litter. What's cat litter for? It's to absorb, and it's used as a filter. So they cook meth, run it through a tube into cat litter, and it's supposed to absorb all the smells so it doesn't go out into the neighborhood. But after a while, they get olfactory fatigue, which means they can't smell it. It's kind of like if you put on a really strong perfume, and after a while, you're just like, your nose gets used to it, and then you walk around, people are like, whoa, like, oh, what'd you do, take a bath? Funnels, duct tape, paper towels, rags, aluminum foil, pill grinders. Here's some of the chemicals. Red phosphorus comes off matchbook striker plates. That's where they ended up starting to get it from. That's why we'd have like bags of matches, because they'd take the striker plates off and extract the red phosphorus off of the little part that you rub the match on. And it was like 10,000 books of matches to get an ounce of red phosphorus. 10,000 books of matches. And they would do it. Iodine crystals. I had 2 partners that went down. Like, they ended up getting transported to the hospital because they didn't know they were allergic to iodine crystals. They were exposed to iodine crystals at a meth lab. To the hospital they went. Fortunately, I was never exposed to any great extent. Never was hospitalized. I did get heat exhaustion once, being in a big suit, 105 degrees out, and I got like heat exhaustion, but not a big deal. Sodium hydroxide is lye, red devil lye. It's a base. It'll eat your skin. Pseudoephedrine, which is your cold medicine, right? Methyl alcohol, which is gasoline antifreeze. Isopropyl alcohol, like this is what you use to make meth. White fuels, so it's like Coleman camping fuel. Muriatic acid, that's what you put in your pool. Or there's sulfuric acid, which goes in your battery in your car. Then there's other chemicals, acetone, toluene. So what kind of odors or what kind of clues do you look for in a meth lab to know if you have one? Stronger and unusual chemical odors. It's like an ether-like smell. Like I smelled so many labs over the years that I could, like if we got a tip on a lab and I got close enough to the property, I could smell and I could be like, yep, that's a lab. I walked up by a hotel room once where we got a tip that they were cooking. Actually, the husband was in the hospital because he was in an explosion, and the wife, we ended up tracking to a hotel, and I saw her carry up a tea jar with two-phase liquid. So her husband's in the hospital, scheduled for surgery because he was in their house that exploded, and he was on fire, and she sprayed him down with a hose, put him in a truck, brought him to the hospital. He was due for surgery the night that she's cooking meth in a hotel room, and we ended up raiding it. And it was like a purple haze in there. But I walked by the door, smelt it. I'm like, yep. And I was able to draw a search warrant because of the unique smell of a meth lab and because I smelt so many of them. Cause nose, eye, or throat irritation. Unusual behaviors of the people. When I was watching the lab where the husband had, where the wife was cooking meth, up in the hotel room. It was a hotel room, and the guys were coming out smoking on the balcony, and then I see them like fanning the door to get all the odors out of the hotel room. So when you got somebody coming out to smoke and they're fanning the door, that's when I walked by, because I'm like, they're cooking like right now, and they were. All right, let's see here. I guess I'll just put that right there. But so this right here was an Aryan Brotherhood Lab, if you want to. Aryan Brotherhood's a prison gang, and Aryan Brotherhood were cooking meth. And there were children in this house living, like sleeping on the floor on mattress pads. This stuff here, I have a better photo of it. It was in a cooler. And one of these is apple juice. And this is like a two-phase liquid that I told you about. This is like meth. This is meth oil right here. That's meth oil. That right there is apple juice. Like, how is a kid supposed to know in a cooler, like, this is contaminated, like hazardous chemicals? There it is. That's the apple juice. And these are all chemicals. So these chemicals that are used to make meth, they're flammable, they're reactive, they're corrosive, they're toxic. And here people are putting them in these containers where it can leak out and contaminate or cross or like react with another chemical and cause a fire. So I felt so bad for the kids living in this house. There it is. Going to be moving me all over the place here. Okay, so some of the hazards: dangerous suspects, poor wiring, makeshift buildings, and there is so much junk around these things. Like, they are like just a hazardous scene no matter what. They have defensive systems, like I haven't seen, I've seen guns, definitely explosives, but not like explosives set up to blow us up. They have like pipe bombs. They have crazy things, man. Definitely alarm systems and security systems. Cameras, like there were cameras, I think, on almost every meth lab. Even in the hotels, they bring in their own camera system. Environmental hazards. Basically, these things can blow up. There's a camera hidden in the skull. There's more cameras. Like, they even put a sign up for their cameras. Like, you'd see so many of these cameras. There's a monitor. This is a funny story. I even wrote about it in my drug investigation book. Like, we did a search warrant. The SWAT team actually hit the house. But it was a tweaker house, and they were all sitting on the couch in the house. And they saw the monitor. There was actually a TV on, and it wasn't this monitor. It was another monitor. But they were actually, the TV was on, and there was another monitor. And so they could see the front of the house. And they saw the police raid the house. And afterwards, the SWAT guys are all in there, and we're standing around, and they're like, didn't you see the cops on the monitor right there? Like, why'd you sit here? And they were so high. They're like, oh, well, we just thought it was like Cops, the TV show. And I kid you not, they were like so out of it. They like didn't register like, oh, that's our place. No, I don't think they lived there. I think they were visitors. So they probably weren't like used to watching that monitor. So here's the banyan tree caper. And this, you're going to become a detective here. So this is where you get to put on your detective hat, eat a donut or two so you have the chemistry in your brain to basically think like a detective, right? So the Banyan Tree is an apartment complex located at I-17 and Cactus, right by the Brass Armadillo Antique Shop. And I find it ironic because the Banyan Tree is also, this is actually when my wife and I had our 10-year anniversary, we went to Hawaii. And a banyan tree grows. There's a whole city park that is a banyan tree. Like, this is the core tree right here. That's the core tree. And the branches go out, and then they drop down. They go out, and they drop down, and they start another tree. Like that tree over there, and that tree over there, and that tree over there. They all come from this tree. So it's pretty interesting. And this guy right here is selling drugs to these people right here. Because I was sitting there watching the banyan tree, and I'm like, how come people keep sitting down on that bench and that guy just keeps sitting there and the people keep getting up and leaving? And I'm like, and then I watched him. I'm like, the dude's selling drugs, like right here. Like, I'm on a vacation and I can't even like turn it off. They're selling drugs right under my nose. So I actually followed an older guy away, followed him to a shop, and I went in there and I said, hey man, is that guy selling some good stuff? And he's like, oh, he's got like the best stuff. And so I badged him. I was just kind of ticked off. I'm like, I didn't tell him where I worked. I just said, hey, I wouldn't go back to see that guy ever again. And he's like, whoa, okay. And he got a little freaked out, but I was like, I don't know. I was just ticked off. On a vacation, you're supposed to like turn it off, but sometimes you just can't turn it off. I've gotten a lot better. So here's the banyan tree. You're going to be a detective here. So I was actually in a patrol car this night because we were going to go do stops from a drug house. And so I was in a patrol car, and so the police radio was on. And as I'm driving down I-17, they're like, hey, we just had an explosion at an apartment complex, and we think it might be a meth lab. And I'm like, oh, I'll head over there. Hang on, I got to take a drink here. So I head over to the apartment complex. I got off the freeway, showed up at the apartment complex here. And it was actually a guy that I became friends with, did my master's program with. And he had just gotten promoted to sergeant. So he was like, oh, man, so glad you're here. Like, I have no idea what to do, man. I just got promoted. So I'm like, we got to evacuate the building. Fire department was there. I'm like, let's just rope it off and figure out what we got. So here's what we got. It's a 3-level complex, 3-level apartment complex. So this is called the subterranean level because it's like half below the ground. It's kind of like those complexes you can look at. And I noticed there's like the door was punched in. So if the door is punched in, it means it was locked. So apparently there was a fire. Suspects left and locked the door. And so the fire department punched the door open. And so fire department's out now, scene secure. I'm doing the investigation. I see a little pair of shoes. And so as soon as I start seeing kids stuff, I'm like thinking, okay, like what happened to the kids? See a little girl's bike. I go into the apartment, and we had to write a search warrant. Like we wrote a search warrant that fire department saw equipment in there that they believed was a meth lab. Like we just don't go wandering into people's apartments, right? So we wrote a search warrant, go in there. The suspects are still gone. But while we're writing the search warrant, we're trying to figure out where the suspects are. So this is the view down the hallway, and this is a door. This is like a bathroom door. This is the door frame going into the bathroom. Fire extinguisher. These are clues, right? Clues. Here's the door frame. Like the fire department didn't pry the door frame out of the door. Like literally the door frame like blew out of the bathroom. Like there was an explosion in the bathroom and it just went, it like popped and it popped the door right out. Here is the ceiling in the bathroom. It went like, right above this was a guy, 82 years old, on oxygen. Like he was an 82-year-old guy. It was his birthday. And he has this oxygen tank so that he can breathe. And he was right above this place. So all the toxic fumes in this apartment, everything that was in the bathroom went up into the ceiling and throughout the whole complex. So we had to evacuate like 30 or 35 units because it went into the whole infrastructure of this complex. Here's the bathroom. Look around. You're a detective, right? What's out of place? That's what detectives do. Like, what doesn't fit with this picture? Like, who has Coleman fuel in their bathroom? Like, I don't think I've ever seen Coleman fuel in a bathroom other than in a meth lab. This is a Pyrex dish. This over here is tincture of iodine. Like, these are things like, as soon as you see it, you're like I could walk in here and just, if somebody told me there's iodine, tincture of iodine, Coleman fuel, and there's a Pyrex thing on the floor, and there was a fire, or basically an explosion, I'd be like, yeah, it's a meth lab. This is the shower curtain that's in the bathtub. So this is a jacket that was on the floor. And I love reading books. I'm like I'm always usually trying to read a fictional book at some time. And if you've read books or you remember, there's like foreshadowing, right? Like a foreshadowing event so that when it happens in the book, it's more believable. So this was on the floor, a jacket that says permanently scarred. It's for a tattoo parlor. So it meant nothing to me at the time, right? This is the smoke detector in the hallway, 20 feet from the bathroom, melted. And you notice something, that there's no battery in it, right? Why is there no battery? Well, because why would you want the smoke alarm to go off when you're cooking meth in your apartment? Nah, that's not a good thing. So 20 feet down the hallway, the smoke detector's melted. So what do you think this is? This was just outside of the bathroom. Like it was in the hallway. And there was actually more than that. It's human flesh. Like the guy was on fire. Like he was on fire and he was coming down the hallway on fire and he was bumping into the hallway and he was leaving his skin on the wall. Here's a smoke detector. I'm sorry, the fire extinguisher. And it turns out the story was, boom, there's an explosion and one of the guy's friends ran out, busted how they have the glass with the little metal thing outside wherever, and you break it and get the smoke or the fire extinguisher out. Well, he cut his hand getting the fire extinguisher out and cut his hand, so then there's blood on here. But then he basically whoosh, and he put his buddy out who was on fire. All right, so let's go back for a second. You're a detective. There's no suspects. And ironically, remember the pictures I showed you of the girls with the needles? Remember early on when we started going into meth, the meth section, the girls with the needles, those photos were from this apartment. There was actually quite a few more photos, but those were some of the drug photos. So you're a detective, and there was an explosion, and somebody was on fire. You don't know that, but you see skin on the wall, and like, I don't remember even what neighbors said, but okay, so you're a detective, your suspects are gone. Like, where do you even start? Like, figure out get with the landlord, like who's on this lease. Okay, figure out who the woman was that lived there. Where would you end up looking? So I hope some of you came up with the hospital. Like, that would be a natural place for somebody injured to go to the hospital. So detective checked the local hospital. I think St. Joe's was the closest to this location. St. Joe's or whatever's down off 19th Avenue. And they said, oh, yeah. We're like, hey, did you get any burn victims in there? Oh, yeah, we had a guy came in, said he was cleaning his toilet with bleach and Lysol, and there was something happening, and it blew up in his face. And I'm like, oh, that's our guy. Is he there? They're like, no, we don't deal with burn victims. We send him to the county hospital. Go to the county hospital. Sure enough, our guy's there. He was there for like 3 months getting skin grafts. And the guy was a jerk. He was a jerk to the nurses. He was just a really, like, a mean person. And so I was talking to one of the nurses. I'm like, hey man, like, call us when you release him because we want to book him, like, for charges. And they're like, well, you know, we have all these laws and regulations, and some nurses would be good. Like, remember the guy the guy that was in an explosion, his wife was cooking meth the night he goes into surgery. That nurse basically said, hey, here's a phone number that shows up from his wife. Because she would always come like late at night and only come for a few minutes, see him and leave, so we could never catch her. Her name was Joy. I remember both of her names, actually. Her name was Joy. And but the nurse said, hey, here's a phone number that she's calling from. And it was that hotel down the road. And so that's when we set up surveillance and saw her carrying chemicals up and busted her cooking meth. But this guy ended up getting released. And like, he went totally into hiding. And we're like, we didn't know where to find him. We knew who he was and everything. But we were able to, and so here's a little tip. If you're trying to find a guy, the way you find a guy is basically through his closest woman. So could be his mother, or if you know, like his wife or girlfriend. And we were able to figure out who this guy's girlfriend was, set up surveillance in the apartment where she lived, and like saw nothing for like 3-4 days. We're like, saw nothing, saw her coming and going. So we sent an undercover cop to the door. And he knocked on the door, and the dude was in there. He opened the door. He's like, hey, what do you want, man? And he's like, oh, so-and-so. And the guy was a jerk to our undercover detective. He's like, get lost, and swore at him, whatever. The guy was just like a born jerk. And so our detective, my buddy, is like, yep, he's in there. So we're like, cool. So I think we ended up, because he was wanted, I think he went to warrant, and he had a felony warrant. We were able to basically knock on the door and arrest him. And that's what we did. And here he is, like 3-4 months after getting major skin grafts. See those scars on his hands and everything? And do you remember the jacket? Do you remember the jacket in the bathroom? Permanently scarred, tattoo parlor. See, there was some like meaning behind it. Permanently scarred. So when I saw him, I was like, I expected him to look a lot worse. Like, his face was kind of ruddy, and I didn't put his face in here to protect him, but like, his face was kind of ruddy from being in the explosion. But look at, like, I was really surprised how much the socks protected him, and he had shorts on, but the whole area that was exposed to the explosion was burned. And like, the guy, like, I wouldn't put handcuffs on a guy if he was, you know, had like these types of recovering injuries, but like, he was a jerk. Like, so I put some cuffs on him. I'm like, you know what? You're going to act like that. Then you're a danger to us. And then right here, you can see where they peeled skin off of his back for skin grafts. They basically just like peel it and then graft it onto other parts of his body. So this is the saddest part. Well, it could have been a lot worse. So we talked to Mom. Mom owned the apartment. She was on the lease. We're we're like, hey man, tell us what's going on. She was in hiding for like 2 weeks, and I was talking to her. I'm like, you can't hide forever. We know who you are. We need to see your daughter and make sure she's okay, because we know your daughter was there with you. And so she finally met us at the police station with her daughter, and her daughter is just this cute little thing. And so then I talked to Mom. I said, Mom, like, what's going on? She's like, I'm a meth addict. Like, it got too expensive. I don't have a job anymore. I have rent. I'm using drugs. Like, so she started letting this guy cook. And we're like 25 minutes into this, so we need to wrap this up pretty quick. We're almost done, actually. She's like, I needed money for drugs and for rent. So she said, I'll let him cook at my apartment as long as I'm not there. Like, I'll leave and you can do your cook, but I don't want to be there with my kid. So she said he did plenty of cooks there and cooked meth. And on the night of this occasion, she said he started cooking before she left. And she was actually upset with him because she didn't want her daughter around. She said that she had just left, like her daughter had just stepped out of the apartment. Like, just literally stepped out, and she was stepping out when the explosion happened. And she said the explosion, like, just squished her in the door, just like, bam. And she showed me her bruises. She's like, I was slammed in the door. My daughter literally stepped out, and boom, the explosion happened, and I was smashed between the door and the door frame going out of the apartment. So here's bruising, and you can see it's starting to recover because she was in hiding. And here's where the door like slammed her. And I thought it was the doorknob, but I'm not sure. But anyways, those are bruises from her getting slammed in the door. So luckily that little girl made it out of there. And if she would have been anywhere near that hallway, a ball of fire would have just like gone right over her. And this is like, again, a demonstration of the whole drug scene. You could say, well, yeah, somebody smoking marijuana isn't going to do this, but these folks here, they started with marijuana. Like, I ask all these people when I interview them, hey, like, how'd you get into this? And they tell me what they did, and it's pretty much a progression with almost all of them. They just go right down that path. So this is the sink of this apartment. There's the little girl's SpaghettiOs. There's a cigarette butt right there. And this right here is meth drying. Right within easy reach of the child. So recognition clues. Again, like, you don't have to worry about this. Like, the Mexican cartels are making all this, and meth lab seizures are way down. But this is really more to show you like what chemicals are in this substance. This right here, ironically, this is a Mexican national cook. They do it big time. Like, those are 50-gallon drums. This is an apartment that's got funnels, red double eye. Remember I told you, like, having Drano isn't a crime, but when you have a whole bunch of it and you got other equipment, like this whole apartment was a meth lab. Like, there's muriatic acid, there's funnels, like there was meth in here, and this guy had saved his trash for like 6 months. There's iodine staining on the floor, same place. Iodine stain on the counters in the bathroom. This is actually a Motel 6. See that? Motel 6 bathroom. And they were dumping so many chemicals down the drain, it ended up like getting stuck and messing up the drain, and it was just a nightmare. And here's how they were cooking it. A frying pan with water. The water's all evaporated. A coffee pot, duct tape, it goes up to tubing into a cat litter that's sitting up in the lights over the table. Here's a meth lab in a bag. This one here is a meth lab in a garage, and my partner actually went to the hospital on this one because he went in the garage before me, and he shouldn't have gone in there, but our sergeant was saying, get in there and make sure there's nobody in there, and we're like, if they're in there, they can stay in there. We're just going to protect it from the outside. And all the dudes ran from this place. They actually had a pinhole camera in their garage, and we were watching the house, stopped some people leaving it, and they had drugs, and they also said, hey man, they're like cooking right now, you know, because they're like, you let us go, we'll tell you we'll give you a tip. And sure enough, the tip was that they were cooking. So we tried sneaking up, but they had a little pinhole camera in the garage door, and they saw us coming up because they were like standing right here cooking. And they all went out the back door, like running, like we heard clanking and banging, and they escaped and left all the moms and the kids, like all the moms and the kids came running out the front door, and they're like, whoa. And there was cops out there, and they ran, they like ditched, left the moms and the kids. And guess what? All the kids in the house tested positive for meth from this meth lab. Here's another meth lab. There's your gasoline antifreeze. Here's your hydrogen peroxide, red double I. See, these are things that when you have them all together, and Sudafed right here. Here's blister packs. These are all the Sudafed tablets that come out of the boxes. This is how you prove a meth lab. And then sometimes you get ones that meth cooks that think that they can either throw you off by putting a Bible in their lab, or maybe they think they're going to be protected. I don't know. So you don't have to worry about this because you probably never run into a lab. But I hope you found at least it somewhat fascinating on how meth is actually manufactured and what's in it. This here is just kind of a little recap. You saw some of these with Faces of Meth in the very, very beginning of this program. If you didn't see it, or you don't remember seeing it, you can always go back to the very first part of this program and you can watch Faces of Meth. Just shows a transformation of people that have been using meth. See how bad they transform. Ooh, scary. Like, look at her. Beautiful woman. A year and a half later, she looks like really, really rough. And I don't know, this one here, this is 2.5 years. That's just absolutely like unbelievable. Like, she looks like, I don't know, she looks like she saw more than she needed to see in life. I'm not sure if any of you have seen this woman here. This is methamphetamine. It could have been amphetamine, based on, this was in the 70s. So there's two stories. One says it's meth, and like another source says it's crack cocaine. Either way, it'll show a transformation of this woman. Here she is at 31, I think 31 years old. 1979, 1980. Like, these are all booking photos when she's gotten arrested for one reason or another. And you will literally see her transform right before your very eyes. Ooh, she really went downhill there. See how gaunt she's getting? Like, the drug is just like consuming all her fat and her muscle. There she is, 41 years old. There you go. 31 to 41. And yet, Americans continue to consume 65% of all the illicit drugs produced in the world. So, I would say that meth will do this a lot quicker. The 1970s, like, that was more the crack cocaine epidemic. The 70s and the 80s, 79, 80s was more crack cocaine. Meth will do this, as you could see from Faces of Meth. Meth will do it heck of a lot quicker. And she actually died not too much longer after this. But look at her eyes. Like, she just looks just like she's seen more than she ever should see. So, that's it. And we're about 34 minutes into it, and there'll be a short quiz as we move along, and I'll see you at the next module.